All right, well, let's dive into today's agenda for today. I do have a lot of resources and other things I'm going to be providing you. Hopefully, that'll give us a little more of a well-rounded view of how outcomes work within Canvas. And then also how they can be used in various places within Canvas, and then how you can also get some information back from those outcomes. So just to introduce myself very quickly, my name is Matt Miller, and I'm a learning specialist here at Instructure. As of April will be my second year of working at Instructure. So many of you know I'm a retired Dean of Online Instruction, also very heavily involved with accreditation at my previous institution. We had the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, slightly different from y'all. How did your on-site go with everything? Did everything go according to plan there? I hope it's over. Okay, so there is that big sigh of relief, but remember, don't take your foot off the gas when it comes to accreditation, okay? That's what gets us all in trouble. So at any rate, I'm glad that it's over for you guys. I know that it's always harrowing, even though you guys do a good job and you know you have quality programs, but they have that funny little word of demonstrate. Demonstrate that you have a good program, demonstrate that you have enough faculty student ratio, all of those types of things you have to then demonstrate. The only way to do that is through data, right? So that's kind of where we are, right? Which is probably a timely thing. We probably should have had this training maybe at first. I don't know. But at any rate, I am glad to be with you all today. Like I said, I've been using Canvas since 2017. We did not actually use outcomes to great effect at my previous institution. As many of you who are involved in that, I'm really impressed with how many of your student learning outcomes and program learning outcomes that you do have in your account at WSU Tech. That's very admirable. It's excellent that you guys do that. But as those of you who put all that together knows, it takes time and it's a lot of work. And so not everybody has that time and a lot of work. Not saying that you don't. I mean, you do. You don't have the time, but again, it's a commitment of trying to get that information and data in there. And I certainly appreciated it when I looked at it. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, they're miles ahead of where we were at my previous institution. If you'd like to log into your account today, you can use the portal there at my wsu.edu and go to Canvas, or we also have a direct link there, that wsutech.instructure.com. Please take a moment if you'd like to go in and play along today. We are going to actually build a couple of outcomes together today and show you maybe a couple of shortcuts that might help you if you are looking at adding additional outcomes to your Canvas instance. So if you'd like to play along, certainly have your computer at the ready. We'll build some outcomes together, and then we'll stop and allow you to kind of have a moment to look at building them as well. I do want to talk a little bit about outcomes. And, as we talk about these outcomes here, one of the things that I kind of look at outcomes is almost like a package. If you think about a package, it's really just sort of a thing that sits there, and it really isn't worth anything until you do something with it. And that's kind of the way we look at outcomes. It's sort of like an outcome is something that you put in Canvas, but you then have to do something with it. It's like you have to put it in a vehicle, and the vehicles that you can attach it to in Canvas then to actually put them to work are what we call rubrics. Rubrics are some things that you can add outcomes to. We talked about how you can add rubrics to your assignments. You can add them to quizzes. You can add them to graded discussion. You can put assignments rubrics to work, and then therefore outcomes to work in a number of places. So I do want to give you a little bit of opportunity to play with some rubrics with me today. And then also, the other places we talked about, and we did the new quizzes. Remember, you can add outcomes to your new quizzes. You can add them to the quizzes themselves or to individual questions. So those are a couple of ways that you can put outcomes to work in your courses, thereby collecting hopefully some great data for you then to use either for accreditation. But, we say accreditation is one of the reasons why we want outcome data. But really and truly, if we think about it too, we want to be able to know if there's any learning gaps. We want to be able to set expectations in our courses and at our institution and be able to measure how we're doing against those as well as our students. And so that's really the purpose behind it is to improve, to help identify at-risk students, to be able to assess learning in many ways, and all those types of things hopefully will help us improve and find those little areas that we can improve as we go through, whether it's the way we teach or the way we conduct business as a school or whatever it is that we're doing, and help us to monitor that. And then finally, we're going to look at the Learning Mastery Gradebook. So kind of running behind the scenes, students go to school, they take their classes, they get their grades. But as we use outcomes in our classes, we do have a Learning Mastery Gradebook that will help you identify what artifacts those outcomes are being used in, and then also be able to look at mastery at the individual course level. And so we're going to look at that too as well. So just a few little things. They can be boring or they can be fun. If you're a data diva, then you're probably going to have a good time with this. If you're someone who's like, oh my gosh, data or whatever, it may not be as fun, but we're going to try to make it as fun as possible. So let's start with talking about outcomes. And of course, as we talked about, some of the benefits and all is to help us sort of identify proficiency. It's to help us look at progress, identify gaps, all of those types of things we can do. In Canvas, you can put outcomes in 3 different places. You can put them at the account level, which is everywhere. It's WSU Tech. And so that's where you could put the account level outcomes and then have them available to everyone in your account, whether they're teaching in a psychology class or nursing or aviation or wherever it is, they can use the same sort of outcomes for that. Then, of course, you have your different departments and you have sub-accounts within Canvas, and you can put them there. By putting them there, you're kind of limiting to that particular sub-account. So they're at the account level, they can be used by everyone, but at the sub-account level, they can only be used by those folks participating at that level. And then, of course, your individual course is also where you can place them as well. At the individual course level, they're only really good for that particular course. They're really not shareable to outside of that. So there is a hierarchy, a tier, a structure, if you will, that will help you with that. So again, just looking at your account, your sub-account, your course, and then of course in your course you have assignments and rubrics and other types of things that you can use to help set up your outcomes and make them work. Okay. So again, we talked about the benefit. I'm not going to belabor that too much. So that's what I'd like to do now is actually go into an account there, and just to give you a couple of ideas of where you have outcomes. Now, I know that you all are using sort of those student learning outcomes that you have. I think those are pretty much established for everyone at the institution. So you have SLOs. They're probably also maybe even provided by the state in many cases, by your state Department of Education or Higher Education Coordinating Board. A lot of times that is done. It may be a little bit different from your academic program versus your career and technical, where those are established maybe by different other types of providers of outcomes. Just give us an example of maybe some learning outcomes we can use here. I'm just going to provide us with this little document here we can just sort of use for fun to create an outcome together here. Other examples of some outcomes. Here's one from LaSalle University and their Business Leadership Fellows program. They have a lot of core competencies out here for career and management, collaboration and teamwork, leadership, all of that kind of stuff as well. And as you might, as Shelby probably knows as well from institutional effectiveness and things like that, a lot of times whatever the outcomes are, they usually kind of go back to your vision and core values at your institution, and eventually your mission statement, right? So it all kind of trickles back uphill toward. It kind of starts with the mission and flows from there into that data, right? So that is kind of the way it works. So, but just a couple of examples here. So if I go into my in my account here. And if we wanted to add those, again, if you're an admin, then you can add outcomes at the admin level. And that's what you guys have done in many cases. You've put, excuse me, outcomes are there. You can add outcomes there. You can also add rubrics, that we're going to talk about in a moment. But this is where you can put your outcomes where they would be used by everyone at the institution. In addition to that, you also have a sub account. And you can see I've got different sub accounts for mine. You have more specific sub accounts for your different departments and schools, and you even have sub accounts to your sub accounts where you have specific divisions within each of your sub accounts there. But my point is that in your sub account, you also have the ability to create outcomes at that level too. We're just going to do it from the course level today and just kind of keep it specific. So I'm going to go into one of my courses here, and I'm just going to actually just go into one of my courses. It doesn't matter which one. You have your instructor practice course you can go in. If you want to use that, you can as well.
Matt, I'd suggest if everybody wants to use their sandbox course, if they have a sandbox course, that would be the one to use.
Okay, yeah, okay, thank you, Casey. Yeah, absolutely. So if you have your sandbox, your demo course that you want to use, yeah, just definitely use that. Otherwise, you're going to fill up that instructor course with all kinds of stuff. So yeah, so definitely use your sandbox. Thank you. So I'm going to go out here to my course. And again, if you don't see outcomes up here, just look on the menu. You'll find them there. I've moved mine around probably out there as well. Now, I do have some outcomes already out here, and so I'm going to kind of ignore those for now. But to create outcomes, you can create outcomes right here by creating a new group. Now, the difference between an outcome group is I could start creating an outcome right away, but if I wanted to kind of house those outcomes into a specific area, like maybe this particular English class, or maybe that's even a departmental or just some student learning outcomes for critical thinking or whatever it is, I can create a group. Now, you can also create groups within a group. So just an example of that would be this National Association of Colleges and Employers. You can see that there is a group that was created here, and then nested within that, you have career management outcomes. I don't think there's anything in that one. I think it's down here. My collaboration team, or which one is? Oh, they're oral written. Okay, so it was in one of these. I have one built. But at any rate, you can see that nested within the National Association of Colleges and Employers, we created another group inside of that called oral and written communication. And within that, we actually have our outcomes for oral and written communication. And you can see that there's 5 outcomes there. And so depending on how you want to do it, you can tier it out as much as you want or as little as you want if you want to. You can just put outcomes directly in there as well. Now, to create outcomes, again, you can create a group first, which we're going to do, and then we'll start creating our outcomes. But also remember that you can create an outcome directly here if you just want your outcomes just listed in this course, kind of loose and not really associated with any group. Remember, the outcome itself, this is just for organizational purposes. It helps you find your outcomes a little easier and keep them a little more organized and together with whatever they belong to. But you can just create them, because remember, an outcome is just a static item until it's actually put to work in a rubric or in a quiz or something like that. So however it is you choose to organize it is really up to you. I do recommend using groups. That's the easiest way to do to it for me, because again, okay, as Shelby puts out there, institutional SLOs, program learning, PLOs, and course learning outcomes will be in groups in the blueprint courses. Okay, so thank you, Shelby, for that. So they're going to already be sort of nested within either SLOs, PLOs, or those individual learning outcomes there too. And that's a really good organized way of doing it. I'm kind of I'm not always organized, but I do like those outcomes to be organized, and that's where it takes a little planning up front to make sure that happens. Makes it a lot easier, particularly at the upper levels. Because the next thing you can do is go out and find outcomes. Now, we're going to create our own, but I just wanted to show you that in this particular course, I could go out and find the account standards that would be at my institutional level. In my case, it's the Miller Academy, and whatever outcomes I have available there. I could bring in then and find the outcomes and the outcomes groups that I want, and I can add all of those outcomes to a group at one time, or I can cherry pick the outcomes that I want. Okay. The other thing you can do is you can actually import outcomes. So if you don't have, of course, y'all have outcomes at the account level, so you could go out and find those for your courses. Your sandbox courses, excuse me, your blueprint courses, as was pointed out, will have as Shelby pointed out, will have your outcomes and things already in there. So you should be okay and not have to worry too much about this. This is more for, I guess, your knowledge to know how outcomes will work. But then also, if you do have additional outcomes that you wanted to create, maybe in a particular program or something like that, there's some additional outcomes that maybe you don't have at that level, then you can grab them as well. The other way is to actually import them. So importing is something you do have to have sort of a you do have to have a spreadsheet set up a certain way for you to do that. So this is the format that you would use, this information here. And it kind of shows you sort of how this would work. And I know this looks busy as all get out. Trust me, the format does work. I've used it many times. In fact, this is an example of how this would work, where you can create a group here. This is my group called the NACE Business, and this is the title here of the group. And within that group, I've got some subgroups, but notice that the parent, there's a parent guide. So the NACE, National Association of Colleges of College Employers, it is the ultimate parent guide there, and then these all would talk to or be fit under this particular parent. So these are the children, career management, and it has a sort of a description of what that is, and social responsibility. And then you have your individual outcomes. So my critical thinking outcomes would then be associated with the critical thinking and problem solving, which is right up here. Okay. And then you can see how you can put the outcome sort of designation for it. You can put down sort of what that outcome is. You can also decide the calculation method, which we're going to go over in a moment. But then again, you can use this as sort of a guide then to upload a lot of outcomes at one time, as opposed to creating them individually. Now, I'm going to share this with you also. This is just an example of the spreadsheet that you might use, and you can adapt it however you wish. But this is sort of an outcomes format. And again, it may be a little bit deeper in the woods, if we say, for that, but it is a handy. The way it's set up is kind of a nice little thing of having a parent group, and then each little subgroup in that group reflecting back to that parent group over here, and then each outcome reflecting back to each of those groups, right? And so that's just and then you can see how they've named them, and you can use the same. You change the naming convention however you wish, but that might be a handy tool for you if you are in the business of wanting to create outcomes that way. So let's talk about just creating them from scratch. We're just going to do it by hand here, okay? So the first thing I want to do is create a group. I'm going to go back to our student learning outcomes examples here. And I'm just going to create a group that's going to have these different outcomes in it. Now, I'm probably not going to do them all. I may do one or two, and we'll just say it's done, okay? Just for the sake of time, and you'll get the idea. But here I'm going to go into my class, and I'm going to create a new group. And this new group, I'm just going to call it my, WSU Tech English Outcomes. Okay. And so now I've got my outcome group there. And the next thing is that I can start adding either in a subgroup or whatever, but I'm just going to start adding some outcomes. So in this group, I'm going to go up to create outcomes. And I'm going to give my outcome a name. Now, naming is kind of important. You want to make sure that you kind of give a little thought to your naming convention for outcomes, because again, if you have several faculty that are using outcomes or maybe in sub accounts and things like that, there could be a lot of things caught up in the crossfire, right? There could be a lot of similar names. It can get really confusing and all of that. So my recommendation is to keep a very simple naming convention. In this case, I'm using English 231, which is a made-up English course, okay? And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 outcomes. And notice that I'm going to name the outcome ENGL or ENG 231-1.1 for my first outcome. And so I've got a very specific name, and I'm going to call that my English 231 1.1. Now, a friendly name is something that you can use that if a student sees the outcome, that it kind of helps them recognize what it is. You know from your accreditation that after a while you start talking in standards and numbers. So what did CR 2.4 say about, this, that, and the other? And we have a tendency to kind of use the college ease of our different naming things instead of calling it what it is. I remember when I first went off to college, and it was like, are you taking, like Lit 101 or Lit 1305 or what? I had no idea what they were talking about. Are you taking British Lit? Yes, I'm taking British Lit. So that would be the friendly name to, whatever it is. Okay. And so, so in this situation, it's kind of maybe what this outcome might be about. So in this one, I'm just using the word knowledge as my friendly name. And so again, I'm being able to identify key ideas, authors, or whatever. And again, that may be a little bit nebulous in terms of a friendly name, but just for the sake of it, I'm just going to call it knowledge. Or just kind of a shortened version of whatever that outcome's about. Okay. And then here is where you're going to actually put in the description. Now, oddly enough, you have that rich content editor right here, okay? This is where we're going to put the actual outcome here, okay? So I'm just going to copy and paste this just for the heck of it and put that in our area here. Now, you can also have a friendly description, and this would be something that might display to the students. You could keep the same description if you wanted to, if it's clear enough or whatever. And then down here is where you're going to be able to identify proficiency ratings. Now, I want you to notice here that, Canvas already has some proficiency ratings already here. But just so you know, you can delete, edit any of these proficiency ratings and including the point values if you want to. Right now, the way we have it is we have sort of a 5-level proficiency rating, 0 being no evidence and 4 being exceeds mastery, with mastery being achieved at 3, according to this. Okay. So you have that ability to edit that, is my point. All right. And in this particular situation, I'm going to leave it as is. Okay. And just kind of keep at 3 or whatever. But you can, if you wanted to have, and I am a big believer in the 3 rubric, the 3 proficiency rating, whether it's good, average, or poor, or whatever. But you can, or maybe no evidence or whatever, but you can arrange that however you wish. All right. You can even add additional proficiency ratings if you want to as well. So just remember that there is that ability to throw away or to add to whatever you want to there. And then comes the calculation method. Now, this is where it gets really kind of in the weeds a little bit, okay? The calculation method, and this is where I'm not the statistician, but I can somewhat explain what each of these things are. Now, recently we did add what's called the weighted average, but if you click on this down arrow, you're going to see that you have a number of different ways to calculate this particular outcome, all right? And the way it works is that you choose one, whichever one you want. Now, you can mix and match if you want to. I know that in some areas, they want just the highest score. Whatever the highest score is on that item would then reflect mastery, okay? Whatever the highest score is. I want you to notice that it does give you some examples of what the scores might be, a 1, a 4, a 2, or whatever. And it just so happens 6 is the highest score. So 6 is what's going to be, that particular artifact is what's going to be then calculated. Okay. But notice that you do have weighted average. This is the most this is the newest one. It's very much like the decaying average in that the most recent result counts as 65%, and then an average of all the other results. So in this particular one here, the most recent one would count as 65%, but then all of these previous ones would only count 35% of the weight. And again, this has to do with exposure to the material, and repeated exposure to material is supposed to kind of give sort of a more scientifically calculated item there. You can change also the weight here if you want to, in addition to what you've done up here. This decaying average would take between two assessments. Again, the same sort of principle, the most recent one being 65%, and then the previous attempts all getting 35% of that. So it would take those two scores and then create a final score for that particular item, okay? And only one result would be returned there. The n number of times, basically, this is where you have to achieve mastery at least a certain number of times here. In this case, it's defaulted to the number 5. So what it's saying is that that the student must achieve mastery at least 5 times for mastery to be calculated. So you can see in this example, that they have all of these different areas here where they've exceeded or met mastery, or so on, and then it would give them a final score there. The most recent score, pretty straightforward. However many times the student takes that particular assignment or quiz, it's going to calculate the most recent one, all right? So just know that is the thing of it there. Shelby added something in here. All the outcomes have been added to the blueprints. Use the highest score. Okay, so all of your outcomes will use the next one, which is the highest score. Again, pretty straightforward. Whatever the highest score is what's going to be calculated. That's fairly common. Just so you know, that's something that we do see often in this, is that they use the highest score. Our nursing department did a lot of that too, as well for those kinds of things. And of course, you have your average. However many times it's taken, it takes an average of those scores and spits out whatever that is. Okay, so that's our first outcome. I'm just going to use the highest score like you guys use, and I'm going to hit that as my first outcome. Okay. So rubrics are actually ways you can use a couple of different ways here. So as you know, many times in your classes, being able to grade consistently, and being able to provide students also with sort of a heads up as far as what you're going to be grading and what you're looking for are really some of the advantages of rubrics. And the nice thing is that you can use rubrics not only to measure outcomes, but you can also add your own criteria to rubrics as well. So you can mix and match. You can have some outcomes in addition to having some of your own criteria. So as you're building your courses and things, just know that particularly for some of those assignments that might seem a little bit subjective, a rubric is a really good way to kind of keep your grading a little more consistent and a little less, as I like to say, capricious and arbitrary. I don't know about you, but when I was in school, I used to submit my written assignments, research papers, and stuff like that. And when I got it back, the professor looked like they bled all over it with all the red ink and stuff like that. It looked like it was just, and sometimes I could read what they were saying and sometimes I couldn't, but I always felt like it was like, okay, maybe I just didn't understand the assignment, or maybe something was going on. As a dean, as someone who also oversaw many grade challenges over the years, that was another thing I would also kind of make sure faculty at least we're aware of how to create and use and make. And I always encourage our faculty in many cases to use rubrics as sort of a means of also helping the student understand exactly what it is you're looking for in the particular assignment, but also maybe hopefully help them sort of have their guideposts in place if they kind of know kind of what you're going to be grading them on and how you're going to be grading them. In some situations, it can seem a little arbitrary. So this is a good way to kind of keep it consistent as well. So it also helps streamline the grading process. So as you're grading in the speed grader, you're going to be able just to mark very quickly and add comments to grades, to different assignments, different discussions, or whatever you want to add. And so again, it does help, I think, in the grading process, and the fewer amount of questions maybe you'll get as a professor in your subject matter, in your subject areas, as far as, what are you looking for? How long does it have to be? How many pages? And, and all that kind of stuff. All of that can be sort of answered within a rubric. All right. In addition to attaching outcomes, which is nice. So I'm in our little assignments demo course, and I'm just going to go out here and just kind of show you maybe an example here of how we can utilize rubrics. Now, again, just like with outcomes, you can create rubrics at the account level. So if you want rubrics that will that everyone at the institution can use, then you can create rubrics at that level. You can also create them at the departmental level. So if everyone in the history department is going to use the same rubric for all the writing assignments, you can create that rubric right there in the sub-account level, and then all the history department would be able to grab that particular rubric. And so you're able to kind of again, the student can see the rubric even before they attempt the assignment, which is another advantage to a rubric, I think. But to create a rubric, again, you can also do it at the course level. Now, you'll notice in your menu over here, kind of the same place with outcomes, you'll see a menu for rubrics. And you can create rubrics, as I've done here. You can create rubrics first if you want to, or add rubrics right here if you want to create a rubric. But I want you to know that also you can create a rubric on the fly or download one from the account or sub-account level as you're creating an assignment. You can see I've got several rubrics right here, okay? But notice that I have several here that I've used for training, different ones or whatever. So to add a rubric, you can go to the menu here and start adding a rubric, or you can create one if you create an assignment. Remember, I'm just going to go out here and just quickly show you by creating an assignment. If I want to create an assignment here, and maybe this is my, writing assignment, or my unit 8 writing assignment, or whatever it is. And here I can then add my instructions. Obviously, I'd want to be a little more deliberate in my instructions there, but for the sake of time, we're just going to use that. And then, of course, I can add my point value that I'm going to use. If I'm using assignment groups for weighing and things, I can add it there. Remember, you can always do that. The type of assignment, let's pretend like it's going to be an online assignment. And I want to make it a file upload. But remember, you can also, if you're doing things in class, maybe maybe you're a welding professor, or welding instructor, and you have a welding assignment, and they're going to be welding something in class. You can create a no submission assignment and still attach a rubric to it, and be able to grade that non-Canvas assignment inside of Canvas using a rubric. All right. So it's a multi-purpose thing. You also have that on paper option, remember. Let's pretend like they're just going to upload a file to me. That's a fairly common written assignment type of method of getting the paper from the student, is for them to upload it directly to me. Remember that you can limit the number of attempts and all that good stuff. You can go down here and add your due date or deadline. Oh, we got a bonus day in February, everybody. There we go. You thought today was the last day, but it's tomorrow. There we go. And once you save and publish that assignment, then you're going to be presented with the concept of adding a rubric here. Now, I kind of wish it wasn't here. I wish it was kind of like part of the assignment creation, because I don't know how many times I forget about it and just move on. But it is at the end. Once you save and publish the assignment or save the assignment, it will then ask you if you want to add a rubric. Now here, remember, if I've created my rubric already, I can find that rubric, or if there's one created at the account or sub-account level, I can grab it there. But if I want to grade a rubric, if I want to create a rubric right here, I can. And there's where you can find it. You'll have that find rubric. And again, if it's at the account level or anywhere in your instance, you can go out and find that from other classes, from your account, wherever you have rubrics, living and hiding, you can grab them there. Okay, but we're going to create our own. And then here is where you can give your rubric a title. So maybe this is my WSU Tech, writing rubric. Okay. And then down here is where you can start adding criteria. Now, here's the cool thing. As I mentioned earlier, you can create your own criterion here, whether it's the length of the paper, whether it's the spelling and grammar or the formatting or however it is you want to add them. But I want you to also know that you can put your outcomes to work by adding outcomes as well. And you can mix and match. So let's just say our first criterion is going to be something like spelling and grammar. I don't know. I'm just going to use an example here. And here I'm going to, oops, I'm not trying to, wait, I'm going to edit this one here. So I'm going to use the first one here. I'm going to click this little pencil icon under the criteria column. And here I'm going to have like maybe spelling and grammar. Okay. It does invite you to add a long description if you want to, but I think spelling and grammar is pretty self-evident, right? So I'm just going to call it that. Notice next that you have a ratings column, and by default, you have a two rating system here. Okay. You can use this as a checklist. And the cool thing is that you can mix and match ratings. If you wanted to have, did student use APA formatting? Yes or no? You can use a 2-point rubric, and the next one could be spelling and grammar, and you could give them 4 ratings if you wanted to. So you can add and mix and match your rubric grading criteria however you want. But let's just say on this one here, I'm going to use the old three rating system here. So my full marks, I'm going to click this pencil icon, and instead of full marks, I mean, we're not in Great Britain, for heaven's sakes, we're in America. So instead of calling it marks, I'm going to say maybe this was excellent. Okay. Now here is where I really want to describe what excellent is, though. All right. So in your actual ratings, you can say, students, submission contained no spelling or grammatical errors or whatever. Okay. That's my definition of excellent. Okay. You also have this no marks, and you could say, here you could do the pencil icon. You can choose to, like, if you want to give a point just for sympathy or whatever, you could do that, or you could have it at 0, whatever you want. And then here you might have, say, unacceptable or whatever euphemism you want to use for not very good. All right. And then down here is where you would need to really define, what unacceptable is, as it relates to spelling and grammar. So you define whatever that is. Notice that you can also add, by clicking here, you can add additional ratings here. Okay. So here you could say this is going to be good. All right. You could say students submission contained few spelling or grammatical errors or whatever, whatever you want to add there. Okay. And then you can add a point value. Now you can, if you want to, in addition to that, you can change the point value however you want. If you'd rather have a 10-point scale to use it on, notice that it automatically does that. You can even put a range in there. So if you want to put a range from 6 to 10 points, from 0 to 6 or 0, okay? And you can create a range there if you choose to. It's entirely up to you. The thing is, you can also mix and match this as well. So if I add another criterion here, you can base it on spelling and grammar, which will save you a little bit of work. So when you add a criterion, you can say, I want to duplicate spelling and grammar, but this time I'm going to call it, like thesis or something. And then here, I'm going to go in and change, this to whatever, whatever that is, whatever's excellent for thesis, You know? So thesis was, well developed, whatever you want to call it there. Same thing with, excellent and good. You'd have to edit those. But if you wanted to, you could add another thing here, and have that one like, maybe just poor. And then you would define poor, right? But again, you can see how you can have 3 there, 4 there, whatever you want. Okay. But writing outcomes or adding outcomes, this is where it gets a little bit better. All right. So even in addition to the rubric items that you have, I can now go out and find outcomes. And so here's my WSU Tech outcomes. I only have one. But when I go out there, I can find the outcomes that I want to use from my class or from my sub account or from my account. And I can attach an outcome here. Maybe I'll use some of these loose ones here for history. I don't know. Well, it doesn't matter. We'll just use this one. No big deal. And so there's my outcome for that. Now, one of the advantages as we were creating outcomes, you might have noticed that whenever you had like exceeds mastery, whatever, it didn't give you an ability to really define what that meant. Okay. But that is a little bit of a bummer. You can, I think, up here, if you do use the spreadsheet method as well, I think you can add more here than just exceeds expectations. You might even have a definition of what that is if you want to get that granular. Okay. As far as what that means as far as exceeds expectations. It's like, okay, I get it. There's always going to be a little bit of arbitrary grading, a little bit of subjectivity, I think, even with a well-crafted rubric. But hopefully maybe not as much. You can say, okay, well, it's near mastery, tell me how, or whatever. What does near mastery mean as opposed to exceeds mastery as it relates to this outcome? Okay. Yeah, and Shelby says you could also add what excellent looks like in the description of the assignment. So yeah, in this description of the outcome, this is sort of defining what excellence is. If you had even a little more solidity. I've always hated outcomes that says we'll be able to, or whatever, like, okay, so he'll be able to play the piano at the end of this class. Okay, what does that even mean, right? And so again, you could get really kind of thickly about it or whatever. In a former life, I actually worked at a facility for people with mental retardation. And I spent a few years there, not only working in direct care, but also working in as professional development at that facility. And one of the things that we really spent a lot of time on was writing goals and outcome, or goals and objectives. So your goal is met by several steps of objectives, and each of those had little steps, 2 or 3 steps or whatever that associated with it. And so we always had to be real careful about showing the ability to do something, as opposed to, or they will know this, it has to be something observable, right? And so that's where it really kind of rubber hits the road there. But again, you can go out and find outcomes, and you can mix and match outcomes. Like here's one from the historical knowledge or whatever that is student is able to. There we go. Poorly written outcome. I'm just picking, but you can see how you can then add outcomes to a rubric and then thereby grade by it. Now you're putting your outcomes to work. Okay. In addition to that, you'll notice that I have right now a total of 29 points. Now, notice that I can't change the point value here. Why? Because mastery has already been established in those outcomes. However, you do not have to use the rubric as part of your grading if you don't want to. Okay. So even though you have points, you can use it in addition to the points that they can earn in the rubric, or you can just not use them at all. So if you go down here to some of these different options that you have. One of them is that you can choose to remove the points from the rubric. Okay, so by removing the points from the rubric, what the student gets is basically sort of an idea of what they're supposed to do, and you can use that as part of your grading, right? But you still can be as capricious and arbitrary with your point assignment as you want. All right. So you do have that ability to then assign your own points as you see fit. If you want to leave the points there, you do not, again, even if you leave the points there, and we're going to do that, we're just going to leave it there and keep the points on the rubric. You can use that with an additional whatever you want to add to that rubric in terms of points. So if I said on this assignment, you have up to 100%, but 30% is going to, or, not 30%, but maybe close to a third or 29 points are going to be up for grabs for this particular, for what I'm looking for on this particular area here. So again, this is just something that you can keep the points and then add to the points if you want to. Notice that you have the ability to write free-form comments when assessing students. And what that does is it takes away all the ratings and allows you just to add commentary to each of those items. If you're using outcomes, it's best not to use that, but to actually be able to assess using the rubric that's part of the outcomes here. You can see the outcomes, the little bullseye or whatever, that little target there. You notice that you can also choose not to post outcomes to the Learning Mastery Gradebook. So this allows you to use the outcomes as part of a rubric, but you're not really calculating them with regard to the Learning Mastery in the course. Okay. And then, of course, you could just use the 29 points. It'll be worth 29 points for assignment grading. You can also hide the total score assessments for them, and then you can hit Create Rubric. And when you do that, now you have a rubric out there in addition to the assignment. Now, what the student will do, I'll quickly go through and maybe add this as an assignment, and we'll just go through and do it real quick to show you how it looks from the student's perspective. And maybe I'll just create a new little module. We'll call this Unit 8. And I will add this assignment to Unit 8, or to this Unit 8 module. Okay. And then from the student's perspective, the student's going to be able to go in and look at the assignment. They're going to see how many attempts they have. There's 2 attempts. They'll see when it's due. They can add their own comment, but they're also going to see the rubric ahead of time. Okay. I did have one school ask me, is there a way to hide the rubric before this, so the student can't see it? The short answer is no. If you have the rubric attached to the assignment, then they're going to see it here. However, the workaround is that you can add the rubric anytime. So you could, and I honestly, this was, I'm trying to remember the name of the school. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But at any rate, they asked that question, is there a way to hide it? And I think it was, I want to say it was something that had to do with, I don't remember. It was something that they were doing. But at any rate, they did not want their student to see the rubric before the assignment, so during the assignment submission process. So the cool thing is, I guess it's cool. I don't know. I don't think I would do this to my students. I want them to see the rubric, but you can, even after students have submitted the assignment. So if I didn't attach the rubric yet, I could have this assignment out there and have students submit the assignment. Then I could go back and attach the rubric to the assignment and use it for grading. So I could actually, you can attach a rubric even after students have submitted. That makes sense? I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me in the sense that I would probably want, to me, I think the students, I mean, it's part of the whole reason of using a rubric is to give the students a little bit of direction, right? And to ensure their success. But there we have it, right? And they had a valid reason, I think. So I'm going to go out here and I'm going to upload my file, whatever that might be. got an essay out here somewhere, I'm sure. If I spell it correctly. The PDF file called One Less Accountant. There we are. 100% plagiarized from the internet. And there's our PDF assignment. I'm going to submit it. You submit it on time, you get a little bit of confetti. All right. And then it should bring up my essay here. Okay. All right. So from the professor's standpoint, they can now go in and assess the rubric, assess the assignment based on that. So they can go to the assignment, go directly to SpeedGrader, or they can go out to the grades, find their student. In this case, it's the test student. Scroll all the way over until they find that assignment. There it is at the very end. And they can click inside the little box and go to the SpeedGrader this way. Or they can go to the column header and go to the SpeedGrader. At the end of the day, there's many ways to get to the SpeedGrader. And remember, you have this wonderful, lovely SpeedGrader where you can add all these different annotations. You can do all of these other things downloaded here. You can add your comments, all of that lovely stuff. But then notice too that you have this ability to view the rubric. I'm going to move that over just a little bit. And as I go through the rubric, not only can I choose what I want to add there, but I can also add comments. So like that. And you can do the same thing with any of these items here. And then add your commentary there. Okay. And then you can save that. Now, again, even though you have, 18 points out of 29 or whatever it was, you can come up here and add whatever grade you want because we're not using that rubric specifically for grading. Okay. And then, of course, you can add your comment, submit that. And now you have the outcomes and your additional criterion added here. Okay. Oh. So Christy mentions that many of her students don't know how to look for the feedback that you gave them. Okay. Yeah. It used to be a little harder, actually. You had to actually view feedback, which was kind of weird. They have made it a little bit easier, I think, for the student. Let me see if I go ahead and maybe I can add a little arbitrary pin mark here or something and submit that. The student they'll see that if something's been graded, they're going to see a little badge there. And if they click on their grades, they're going to see these blue dots. So these little blue dots, and also, this will give them information as far as what they've gotten. And so now it used to be by clicking here, there was a little thing that said view feedback or something like that. But now it should hopefully be able to show them, when they submitted it, the instructions were how they rated on the rubric, including the instructor's comments for each of those items. And then it didn't capture my little squiggly. I think I submitted the grade prior to, but at any rate, they can see whatever the professor had marked or annotated on that particular item there. I want to talk a little bit about, we've talked about aligning outcomes to rubrics and all that good stuff. So now we're going to kind of go back in and look at the Learning Mastery Gradebook and what that looks like. To do that, I'm going to switch over to this Intro to Business class. I think it has a better Learning Mastery Gradebook than what I have. But just to kind of show you, there's a couple of areas here where the Learning Mastery Gradebook will appear. If you go to grades, for example, in your gradebook, from the admin and even the sub-account admin's perspective, you're going to see that there are that you can get reports. I've got the Learning Mastery Gradebook pulled up. Let me go back to our traditional gradebook and we'll do it the old-fashioned way. We'll go to it. correctly. You can get reports from the account level or the sub account level. Now, these reports can be downloaded. Let me just take, we'll come back to this one in just a second. I want to take you to my account here. And if you are an admin, you do have quite a few little things there. I will say this is something that is getting better. And that is, in Canvas, there's a lot of analytical data. And some of it is, I like to call it head bob information, right? You kind of look at it and you bob your head and go, well, that's kind of interesting, but that's about all it's good for. I mean, there's just some stuff. It's like, well, that's kind of good to know, but how do I use it? What do I do with it or whatever? And so there's a lot of that. Okay. We'll say that. And I will say that they are getting much better. Like, for example, the new admin analytics, you can really drill down and look at a bunch of different things that are in the admin's accounts here. But if you go to your settings, there are several reports that you can also glean. So you can go to glean. Are they pretty reports? Are they easy to read? No, they really aren't, unfortunately. But, because they are CSV files, you can bend them, shape them any way you want to, hold it up to the light and look at many different facets and sort them a lot of different ways or whatever. But here you do have an outcome results and an outcomes export. So if you have outcomes in your class and you want to get it into the to this format right here, okay, you do have the ability, if you want to export your outcomes as an admin, you can export your outcomes as that CSV file, like I shared with you earlier. And then if you wanted to add a little extra thing to it, you could, or build on it or do whatever. But you do have an outcomes results. And again, it's not the prettiest thing in the world. It does give you each student, their ID, the different assessments that they used to get their outcome data, what they earned on it, and so on. And all the different grading points and all that kind of stuff as well. And you can see if they're active enrollments or inactive enrollments. So you can get some interesting data from the outcome reports. Same is true on the sub account. So again, this is where it makes sense to do. If I want the big umbrella, I want the whole WSU Tech outcome reporting, I want it all. Okay, then you can get that. But if you're a department chair, then you don't want all that, right? You only want various things. So again, you could go to a sub account, for an example, and go to settings. There are some outcome reports. There's some reports you can get from that as well. So you can get outcome results, same thing, but on a smaller scale. Okay. So that just to kind of give you, again, the tiers, right? You got your WSU Tech, then you got your sub account, whatever that might be. If you have sub accounts, you can even make it more granular if you want to. I think in aviation, I saw you had several sub accounts to the sub account in there as well. And the same thing with a couple of other ones that I saw as well. So that's great. I'm telling you, you guys are like a case study on setting up your account. I maybe have you guys come along next time and show everyone how to do it right. So the end result then would be what we would call the Learning Mastery Gradebook. This would be at the course level, okay? And so that's what the Learning Mastery Gradebook essentially is. It's sort of like an outcome report. It is kind of pretty, actually. So you go to your gradebook, and you can go up here to the gradebook and choose Learning Mastery Gradebook here. When you do that, you're going to be able to see all of the outcomes that are used. And again, they're using those ugly names there, but you can see what the outcome is. You can see all of the students in the class. Notice that you can also hide outcomes with no results. So if you have outcomes that weren't utilized or not be, in the course, but not really being put to work or not utilized or whatever, then you can hide those. I mean, I may have several here. Yeah, I may have a few outcomes here that are just in there, but I'm not using them or whatever. And so notice that you can hide those outcomes and just have outcomes that have results in them, okay? You'll also see these colors over here too: exceeds mastery, mastery, near mastery, below mastery, and well below mastery, okay? So you have some different criteria there as well. Notice that you can also drill down by taking away some of these colors here and just being able to see the bad news, all right? Or then next to the bad news, and then keep going up that way. So you can it kind of helps you identify those learning gaps a little bit. I think a little bit easier being able to see it in this manner. Notice too that you can keep adding and stuff for that. You can export this report as a CSV file as well. So you get that course level outcomes mastery report. But I really like this one because there's so many outcomes that are being used. And I really like the fact that you cover over any of these outcomes. And not only does it give you sort of what the outcome is, it also kind of gives you a whole class breakdown of this particular outcome, right? And so here you can see that, 30% or so, let's make it 35% of my class is either at below mastery or well below, or near mastery or below mastery in this particular scenario. All right. Here, kind of the same, almost 31% is either at below or well below or near. And you can see the breakdown for the class there. Okay. And of course, the individual students as well. The other thing you can do is by clicking on the student's name, you can actually go out to the student's grades. Remember that just like you can in the people menu or you can in the Gradebook, this is just another type of Gradebook. You can actually go out to grades here. And in addition to seeing Bruce's grades right here of what they're making in the class, notice that there's a Learning Mastery tab that you can go out and view all of the different outcomes, right? You can also see how many alignments it had, and you can see where that outcome is being employed right here. So it's in the business quiz. If it says not yet assessed, it means that he hasn't taken that yet. It's kind of difficult to do with fake students and fake fake assignments and all. In your classes, hopefully it'll be a little more meaningful and you'll be able to see a little more data there. But you can see where it was assessed in this management quiz that the student was able to master it. And remember, whatever the highest score is what will be assessed there for that. So again, this is how the student stacked up with that outcome, with that particular outcome. You can see the same thing in these different outcome groups as far as, if it has been assessed, this is 3.86. And you can see there's a few areas where that outcome was being used in these 3 areas here, and then where it hasn't been assessed as well. This outcome is really used in a lot of different things. And you can print these grades right here, okay? You can export the Learning Mastery Gradebook as well. So you do have, a little bit of flexibility with regard to that as well. You can use that from the Learning Mastery Gradebook or from the individual report to be able to export that information with regard to the outcomes. Oh, some of the data analytics. Oh, you're right. Thank you. Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. I love data analytics. All right. I did a whole training on this earlier as well. This was kind of fun. So in this class, let's just use this class as an example. There's a lot of, like I said, a lot of head bob data, but there's also a lot of really good data that you can find here in your classes. As an instructor, there's just a lot of data points, to be able to tell whether or not a student has been participating in your classes, kind of how they're doing, and be able to stack up information with them. You have that capability. And so just to show you a couple of ways to do that, of course, your people menu is a good place to start. Your people menu allows you to kind of give a little quick look at all the students that are in your class. You can see what their last activity was, their last time that they did something in your class. It's important to kind of make a distinction between what's called activity or what they've done versus views. So being able to log into your learning management system and look at a page on a course is considered a view. If you stay 2 seconds on a page, it registers as a view or a hit, right? And so just know that just logging in doesn't necessarily register as an activity. It doesn't at all. The student has to do something in the course to be considered an active participant, such as submitting a quiz, submitting a discussion, submitting an assignment. Those are things that the student does in the class that counts as activity. But it does keep sort of a running total of how long the students have been in your class, how much time they spend. But this is not exactly a great indicator unless it's just a really, really small number and they're halfway through the semester and the student's like, I don't know why I'm doing so poorly. Well, Pepper, you've only spent 9 minutes in my class. Okay. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know. Again, it's not necessarily conclusive. She could just get a lot done in 9 minutes, go in there, get her stuff, download it, print it, whatever, so I've never really used that, but, causation, correlation, or whatever. But when you click on the student's name, you do get what I kind of call this little baseball card, this context card. For those of you with admin capabilities, you're able to act as a user, which I think is the best thing in the world, to be able to go in and see what the student sees, if there's issues, and help troubleshoot. You'll also notice, though, even as a faculty member, that you always have the ability to communicate with your students in many ways. So if you're just out here in the course, you're seeing, maybe he hasn't logged in a while, and you want to just send Bruce a quick message, you can click there and do that. You also can look at the students' grades as we just did. You can look at their grades one at a time. You can print them off or look at their mastery gradebook or learning mastery as well, as we've just done. You do have the ability to show details. If I go up here, not only can I see sort of what Bruce made on this assignment, I can also see what the mean average, what the median, what the high, what the low was, what the quartiles was in the upper and lower quartiles. I can also see where Bruce stacks up against the rest of the class. So you can, show a little bit more information as far as that. Again, maybe a head bob, but it still gives you a little more data on these details here. You can see what the average score is. The other thing, though, is really with the, let's go back just a little piece here, is that you can look at individual analytics. I really don't care for this view, frankly, because it's just one person, but you do have this new analytics over here that you can click on. And this will just kind of give you Bruce's breakdown. This is Bruce's average score in the class right now. I can see what Bruce's course grade is based on all of these different assignments. You can see I've got a little slider bar, and I've got this little scatter graph that shows me how Bruce did on these particular assignments. Okay. This little scatter graph is fun to look at, I guess, but I'm more of a table view guy. So you do have the ability to convert any of these reports into a data table, which to me is a little more useful. Okay. I can see the grade. I can see when they submitted it. I can see what grade they made on it, if it was on time, if it was late or whatever, or if it was missing altogether. You'll see those things there. So this will kind of give you a little bit more information. Of course, you can download this as a CSV file. So if you do have a grade challenge coming up, you can go out and grab that information and use that as well. Their weekly online activity just kind of gives you, and these are dummy students, and I don't mean that in the literal sense. These are just fake students in the class, where I can see what they've done in any particular week and download it. I can see how many views of items that they did versus how many participations. So I can see on this roll of business quiz that Bruce submitted it 4 times here, which I guess he was able to do. And you also have communication, and this doesn't really tell me much. Let's just go back to this. It tells me communications between the instructor and the student. You can't really go in and find out what the messages are, other than you could just see a little chart of this is how many times the instructor reached out to the student. This is how many times the student responded and on which days. It may not be very useful to you. I find instead, if you go to your home screen or home page on this course, I find that the new analytics for the class, not just the individual student, is much more interesting. So I'm going to go home, and I'm going to go to analytics, new analytics over here. Now here, this is everybody in the class. So every section in the class or whatever. I have a course grade, just like I had with Bruce, right? And I can see, I can also drill down by assignments, quizzes, or whatever here. I can remove some of these items and just look at specific items, or I can look at all of it. I can also choose that data view, that table view. And this is a little more interesting. I can see when the due date was on the assignments. I can see what the average of what everybody in the class made on it. But wait, there's more. If I wanted to say, what did Bruce look like compared to the rest of the class? And maybe what does Britta Perry look like? These are two students in my class here. I can do a comparison. You can only do two in addition to all sections at a time, okay? So a little bit of a bummer. But here's Bruce, here's Britta, here's everybody else in the class. I can see Bruce didn't do as well as the rest of the class, and Britta did a little bit better, but not as good as the rest of the class here. If I go back to that data shape thing, you'll see that there's Bruce, there's Britta in the pink, and there's the rest of the class here, and I can sort of see, where they stack up for each of these assignments here. Again, I prefer the data table. I really like that view better than I do the other one. The same thing is true with activity. Here, I'm going to take Bruce and them away here, but I could compare Bruce's activities and Britta or whoever else is in my class compared to the rest of the class. It's going to show me all the different items in my course. It's going to show me how many students are in the course, how many times they viewed the items, how many participations, and so on. And you can see for weekly, how many page views, how many participations each week. Again, kind of a head bob, but it's there. Now, students, though, this tab is really helpful. This one shows me their grade. It shows me their percentage of on time. Okay. So and if they're late or missing or whatever, it's going to show me a percentage of their on time. It'll show me their last participation, like it does on the people menu. It's also going to show me their last page view. So the last time they looked at a page in Canvas. Then it's going to show me a total of page views and participations. Just like before, I can also look at individual students here. And I can compare a couple of different students here if I want to. So I don't have to look at all of them at the same time. One of the cool things too is in this new analytics area, remember I got to it from the home page, is if for any of these items, I can click on this envelope and I can message anybody that has a score range of say 0 to 60 or whatever. And it's going to show me there's one student that falls into that range. And it'll blind copy all of these students, but I can sit here and I can send a subject and a message here for anybody that's making a 0 to 60. So maybe this is something I can do to encourage them to get some help, maybe give them some, give them some encouragement, but maybe give them some resources, that kind of thing. Simply telling them you're failing the class. Okay. I mean, they may not be the brightest bulbs in your class, but they at least know that probably I'm failing. All right. And they probably can extrapolate that a little bit. If I wanted to also change the range, maybe to 60 to 80, maybe they're on the bubble. I can send all of those students a quick message as well. And again, it's blind copies them. So Ben doesn't know that Happy's received it and so on. Okay. Anybody who has missing assignments, I've got 18 students out here with at least one missing assignment. Maybe I want to give them a little amnesty if they give them a deadline, and if they turn in their missing assignments, then I'll give them a grade, but at a deduction or something. I don't know. You can use that for however you wish. Okay. For anybody that's late, it will also you can also send them a blind copied message, just kind of reminding them, hey, you're showing some habits of being late. Be sure and manage your time better. Here's some resources or whatever. Okay. The reports area, this is actually there's some good stuff here. In the reports, anybody that has a missing assignment, you can actually run a report. It'll give you the name of the student, which assignment is missing, when it was due, that kind of stuff, how many points it was. And you can run that report. It'll give you an Excel spreadsheet, a CSV file that has a list of all the missing assignments, late assignments, or excused assignments if you have some students that were excused. Many times professors always ask me, hey, I just want a good spreadsheet of my students' rosters, of a roster for my class. And you could tell them to go to the Gradebook and do all that, but it's going to download the whole Gradebook. You have this under the reports area, the class roster, which will just have the student's name and ID and their email address and in the court or the section that they're in. They're probably all in the same section because I don't think you guys are cross-listing. But you can run that report and get a good class roster. There's also class activity. So you can, again, this is kind of like that student report where you can see all the students' names here, their ID, okay? You can see the course name and all that good stuff. You can see what content they viewed, how many times they viewed it, and if it's something that they participated in, it will also give you a return on participation. Just another quick a quick little data point as well is that, again, going back to the people menu and going into a person's name, again, it pulls up that little, and by the way, this, you can get to it from the Gradebook also to pull up this, what we call a context card. It gives you a quick class average, how many missing and late assignments. It also shows you sort of a pattern of however many last assignments. It won't always be 9. It might be 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever assignments here. But what you're looking for here as a professor is you're looking for a trend, a downward or an upward trend there. If they start kind of falling by the wayside as the semester wears on, it might be an indication that they're being disengaged or something's going on that maybe requires an intervention. Okay. And so that's just what you're looking for. But if you look at their name here and you click on it, there's just a couple of other little things here that I think are fun. Now, as an admin, you do have some additional things that you can pull, some additional data that I think is amazing. If you're an admin, for example, when do they log in? How many times they log in? All of that stuff. You can really drill down and get some really good data there. For a student, you can go to their grades, just like we've done. You can look at their individual analytics, as we've already done. You do have this outcomes report. So this kind of goes along with the outcomes that we were talking about. I think this is probably a better view of those outcomes than in that grade book that we saw. So the outcomes report, it'll spin. There we go. So this shows me all of the outcomes. It shows me how many attempts. It also shows me their latest score as well. Now, for things that weren't attempted, it doesn't score. All right. But for any of these other items, it is showing me their outcomes and then what their score was, their average percent on that. And you can see for Bruce here that there are several outcomes here that they attempted with various artifacts. It doesn't let me see the artifacts. I have to go to the Learning Management Gradebook, but it does sort of give me Bruce's overall sort of view of what types of outcomes he was encountered as he was taking quizzes or tests or doing whatever in that class with the different ways in which that outcome was utilized. The last little thing here too, oops, let me go back in time, is this access report. This is one of the first places I always looked. Again, I clicked on the student's name when I saw the course card, and then I get to the access report here. This is one of the first places I would go when my phone would ring and a student would be on the other end saying, my professors just kicked me out of class because I'm not showing up and all that kind of stuff or whatever, and I would listen. I learned way too late in my career just to shut up and listen to students and parents and things like that, instead of trying to automatically formulate a rebuttal or whatever. But at any rate, as I was listening to the student, I would go ahead and kindly pull up their information. And normally this is where I would go. And what I would look for here, it's going to show me everything in the class, how many times the student had actually viewed any particular item, assignment, or whatever. Now, remember, viewing it doesn't mean they did it, but it means that they've laid eyes on it. Okay. I can also see how many times they participated. So for this group assignment, I can see that this was submitted one time, this quiz was submitted 4 times, and so on. But then I can also see sort of a last viewed, and it's going to give me sort of a chronological order here of what was viewed during that time. And notice that it goes back in time from 4 hours ago all the way back to, and it's going to keep loading more results for however long this has. Now, this is not a typical student in a typical class, so this is going to be a lot of junk going back to 2022 or maybe even before that. But what I would always look for were patterns or things. So again, if it was an online student, then the expectation is that they needed to be in Canvas, right? Probably quite a bit, at least, or maybe not every day, but every other day at least, or whatever. But I would, as they were telling me their story, I would be like, okay, so let me just, okay, I appreciate you telling me that, but I do have a question for you. Between February and April of 23, I see that you really didn't access Canvas or do anything. And then usually it gets really quiet on the other end of the phone. And I'm not a gotcha guy, but you know what I mean? It's just kind of like I'm trying to work through the problem. Now, me, when we have a problem, I want to get the solution. And the best way to do that sometimes is to present the evidence and say, well, I'm just showing, can you explain to me why you didn't log in, during those times? And then usually it's, well, I had an operation or I had a surgery or whatever. But if they're complaining about, unfair treatment or something like that, and yet in a spring semester class, they logged into Canvas in the month of April 2 times or whatever, then that could be an indication, not conclusion, but it could be an indication that maybe that's why their score isn't as high as they wanted it to be, you know? And so we need to think about that. And so that's just, again, it's not a, Zoom, I got you. You didn't log in, or whatever, but it is kind of helpful. And again, as an instructor, one of the things that we definitely want to look at, is we want to try to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, if we start seeing a decline, and I worked at a community college, so it was an open door institution. Many of our students, it had the impression it was like high school 2.0, or whatever. And so trying to hang on to those students and trying to teach them how to be college students was part of the challenge, right? And so, and many times maybe they had been rewarded for, saying, well, I don't have to go to class or whatever. So managing time and managing freedom are things that many of our students struggle with. And so if we can catch them a little bit early and say, hey, wait a minute, I noticed you're not coming to class, light a fire, Now I did have a Spanish professor that worked with me with Canvas, and she was one of those that was she was like, well, and this one student, she's a really good student and she hasn't shown up in 2 weeks. So I drove by her apartment to see if, I'm like, please, Catherine, do not stalk the students. Okay. But she would get so frustrated because it's a really good student, and she's seeing things happen and she really cares about, it was like, okay, you have to kind of draw the line there maybe a little bit, but at any rate, don't stalk the students. Right. But there are some really good data points out there that I hope that you'll be able to see that we've looked at some of those. I'm going to take us to the end here now and just say thank you all again for joining me. I look forward to seeing you all again next time. We're going to be doing some course design considerations and accessibility, I believe, on the 6th. Please take time to get your badge. For those of you who are watching the recording, you missed a good one. I think we had some good times today. I hope this information is helpful. And I'm going to put the badge link for you in the chat just in case you don't have your phone handy. So there's the badge claim as well as my survey. So please take a moment to grab your badge. And if you feel inclined to leave some comments, that would be good too. And just any questions so far for the good of the cause. I hope this information is helpful. So y'all have a great rest of your day and we'll see you again soon. Bye guys.